A canopy of century-old growth cedar and Douglas fir, their immense trunks like colossal hands, sheltered the forest floor from the thin, watery sunlight of late autumn. The light barely filtered through the dense, damp undergrowth, leaving the low shrubs deep in cool, moist shadows. Ethan carefully picked his way, avoiding the slick, moss-covered roots. The tree trunks were completely enveloped in a thick, jade-colored coat of lichen. He was searching for mushrooms, hoping to catch the earthy, distinctive scent they would release into the heavy, wet air. But the search today was more a self-administered therapy, a retreat from the endless paperwork, the gridlock of city highways, and the persistent tension glued to the back of his neck. The woods and the Cascade foothills, in late October, filled his lungs with the sharp scent of damp pine needles and bitter, elusive forest air, granting him the illusion of peace. He paused. His hand hovered over the meaty, white cap of a fungi. Classical music flowed softly through his earbuds, a cello holding its final, resonant note. In the sudden silence that followed, something cut through the stillness. A sound that did not belong to the forest or the season, a weak, barely audible, but long whimper. Ethan pulled the earbuds out, feeling the rush of cold air against his ears. He stood for a full minute, allowing the last echoes of urban noise still ringing in his head to fully dissipate. The surrounding forest was absolutely silent. Then, somewhere far off, he heard the faint drumming of a woodpecker, and the whimper came again. This time it was slightly louder, still frail, like someone scratching glass with a tiny claw. Ethan frowned. At first, he thought a bird or a rabbit was caught in a snare, but the sound was wrong. It wasn't the panic of a wild creature, but the weak, pleading sound of a child. He forgot the mushrooms and pushed forward. His steps became slower and more deliberate, his boots sinking into the carpet of wet pine needles and fallen leaves. He wasn't so much walking towards the sound as following it, like a phantom that appeared and vanished. What in the world? He muttered to himself. After about 50 yards, he reached the edge of the woods. Beyond a low belt of thick shrubbery lay a desolate, profoundly grim sight. It was less a forest edge and more a forgotten wasteland. Judging by the broken concrete slabs, it might once have been a warehouse or a repair depot. Everything was choked by weeds and stinging nettles. Construction debris and rusted iron scraps were scattered everywhere. But what stood out most was the silence. It felt completely alien here, not the forest's hush, but the quiet of decay. The sound came again, stronger this time. It was definitely a puppy, or something close, a Malamute puppy's cries, undoubtedly. A sharp, high-pitched mewling that would instantly clutch at the chest of even the most indifferent person. Ethan felt an unpleasant chill run down his spine. Where is it? No houses, no signs of life, just this desolate mess in the middle of a dump. He clambered over a broken wire fence, long since buried under the earth, and stepped into the open. The smell of rot and garbage mixed with the fresh forest air, hitting his nose in a heavy, viscous wave. It smelled of damp rust, old tires, and decaying food. Ethan looked around. The puppy's voice was echoing from somewhere beneath a mound of rubble. He approached what had once been a concrete foundation slab, partially collapsed and overgrown. Underneath the exposed root ball of a gnarled old fir tree, there was a dark, narrow opening. The whimper intensified, now desperate and broken. "Hey!" he called out. "Come out, buddy." Complete silence was the only response. A few seconds later, a faint, terrified breathing sound came from the depths of the hole. Ethan knelt down. The ground was dirty, cold, and sticky. He saw a shadow move in the dark interior of the hole. "Come on out, boys. I won't hurt you." He reached his hand towards the entrance but stopped, sensing the movement was too sudden. Instead, he placed his palm flat on the rough concrete slab beside the opening. The cold bit into his fingers. In the thin, dim darkness inside the hole, something small and fragile happened. A faint, trembling whimper cut off mid-sound. It wasn't a growl of threat, but a final, helpless resistance. Ethan slowly lowered his gaze. Just inside the entrance, half buried in dead leaves, lay a small, dirty gray ball of fur, almost translucent. The sight clenched his heart. The puppy was terrifyingly emaciated, skin and bone. His hips were practically concave, and his eyes seemed too large for his shrunken face. In the darkness deeper in the hole, he caught the movement of a second one. It burrowed even further away. The man understood he was cornered. He couldn't leave, and he couldn't drag them out by force. They were wild, terrified, and clearly near death. He stood up, feeling a knot of sickness and revulsion for this place. He imprinted every detail, the overgrown ruins, the shattered concrete, the foul air, and the tree root that had become a sanctuary for two dying souls. His eyes traced the piles of garbage, broken glass, and plastic. He suddenly felt a physically unpleasant dryness in his mouth. "All right. I'll come back tomorrow," he whispered into the darkness of the hole. He knew he had to return, or that frail, pleading whimper would haunt him for the rest of his life. He backed away, feeling the puppy's eyes, full of empty terror, watching him from beneath the root. He didn't take a single mushroom. On his way back, he no longer heard the forest's hush, only the lingering echo of the puppy's weak cries. "Tomorrow, I need to bring food, not a carrier." "You're late, Ethan. I thought maybe you'd caught a bear." "Empty-handed?" Sarah, his wife, stood in the kitchen doorway. She held a ceramic mug, steam rising from it. Her thin eyebrows rose at the sight of Ethan, stained with dirt and matted weeds. Ethan dropped his hiking pack onto the tile floor beside the door. It hit with a heavy thud. He couldn't remember the last time he felt so hollow. A bear? He took off his muddy boots, trying not to track dirt. "No. Worse. I found something." "What?" She stepped closer, noting the unusual sharp edge in his voice. "You were supposed to be back an hour ago with chanterelles." He walked into the kitchen, past her, and turned on the kettle. The aroma of sautéed onions and home cooking hit him, and he felt a wave of nausea. He had imagined this scent mixing with the intense stench surrounding that hole. The place. Ethan turned back, leaning his hands on the counter. "You know, past the old lumber mill ruins? I found Alaskan Malamute puppies there." Sarah placed her mug on the table. The small sound of ceramic hitting wood seemed unnaturally loud. There was no surprise in her voice at the mention of stray puppies, only a heavy, understanding sympathy. She knew him. She knew his calm judgment failed when faced with someone else's suffering. It looks like," he shook his head. "They're in a hole under the roots of a fir tree. Tiny. Wild. Shaking with fear." "You didn't bring them with you?" "They won't let me get close. They hide. If I tried to drag them out by force, I'd either seriously injure them or lose their trust completely. They're terrified. And they're alone out there. The mother must have gone off and not come back." Ethan looked at his wife. "I have to go back tomorrow." "With what?" Sarah put the kettle on the burner. "A trap gun? Or a crate to carry them in?" "Food," he stated firmly. "And patience. I need them to trust me. It's going to be near freezing soon." The conversation fell silent. Sarah knew arguing was futile. She walked over and touched his wrist. A little after 9 the next morning, as the sun was just beginning to bleach the tops of the tallest cedars, Ethan was back on the unmarked trail. He parked his truck in the same deserted spot as yesterday. His backpack, instead of water bottles and a thermos, contained carefully foil-wrapped containers, boiled chicken, minced meat, and warm oatmeal. The walk through the woods felt lighter. The dampness that had settled on the pine needles and leaves during the night had a sharp, clean scent that cut through yesterday's suffocating stench. He moved quickly, avoiding familiar spots, dodging holes and hills. Reaching the edge of the woods again, he climbed over the rusted wire and was back in the ruins, the same desolate dump, looking like the aftermath of a small fire. Burnt logs, plastic scraps wind-blown across the asphalt. He didn't hear the whimpering immediately. There was a complete, suffocating silence. Ethan's heart pounded with anxiety. He quickened his pace. What if they left? What if they died? What if they couldn't survive that cold, solitary night? He went straight to the spot, the gnarled fir root, the concrete slab, the hole. He dropped to his knees. The cold dirt soaked through his thin trousers. "Hey. I'm here," he said quietly, without raising his voice, remembering how his abrupt call yesterday had startled them. "I brought food." He began unpacking the containers. Just then, from deep within the hole, came a very weak, almost subhuman sound. It wasn't a whimper, but a choking, gasping sound. He opened the container. The warm scent of boiled chicken immediately cut through the moisture and the smell of rot hovering over the hole. Ethan took a few small pieces and placed them on the cold, rough concrete right by the hole's entrance. "Here. It's a feast." He backed away a few yards, sitting on a large, flat rock to wait. Time passed slowly, like melting wax. Every moment felt like an eternity. He kept his eyes fixed on the hole. Sunlight filtered through the shrubs, illuminating the debris field. Less than 10 minutes later, Ethan caught movement and held his breath. A damp black nose emerged first from the hole, slowly and cautiously sniffing the air. The smell of food was too strong to ignore. Next, a muddy head with large black eyes appeared. The eyes were full of animal terror. This puppy, with its stronger Malamute instincts, made a sudden, quick lunge forward, only lightly touching the cold ground with its paws. Its whole body trembled, the shuddering traveling up to its shoulders, making its movements clumsy and rigid. It looked at the pieces of chicken, then at Ethan. Its gaze held more suspicion and gnawing hunger than fear. Gathering its courage, the puppy darted out, grabbed the largest piece, and vanished back into the darkness. The entire action took less than 3 seconds. Ethan exhaled. His throat was dry. He didn't laugh or rejoice, only felt a small release of the heavy weight on his chest. Inside the hole, the sound of greedy chewing echoed, and then a second, smaller sound joined it. "That's right, boys," Ethan whispered. He knew they were sharing. "You have to eat." He placed a few more pieces at the entrance. He would have to come back tomorrow and the day after. He needed these animals to understand that this man was a source of warmth and salvation. Fear. That was the first thing the small black ball of fur felt. The cold of the earth pressed against its flank, but the isolation was the most unbearable. The hole smelled of fear, moisture, and rotten grass. Black was curled up against his brother, Red, feeling the painful press of Red's ribs against his skin. Their mother had left, leaving only a faint, almost intangible smell of milk and warm fur. Now, that was entirely extinguished by the cold and hunger. And then he came, the man. Big, smelling of the woods and something sharp and unfamiliar. And he smelled of food. Black, with the nature of a Malamute, instinctively understood that food meant life. But Red, always more timid and cautious, instinctively understood that humans meant danger. "Don't move. He hurts." Like the big shadow that scared Mother. Red whimpered inside his mind, burrowing into the deepest part of the hole, where the fur roots offered slight protection. He felt the muscles in his hind legs tense until they ached. He was ready to dart out and disappear even deeper at any moment. "If anything happens, I can't smell past the burning in my nose." Black answered his brother. The hunger was stronger than the fear. Hunger felt like sharp needles under the tongue and a dry, clawing weight in the belly. Outside, the man's low, monotone voice was heard again. He spoke flatly, slowly, making no sharp sounds that would throw them into a panic and make them bolt. Black made a decision. He thrust his head out. Food. He saw it. Small brown pieces that smelled incredibly tempting, resting on the cold, wet stone of the entrance. He felt his ears instinctively flatten against his head, but it wasn't from fear of the man was too far away. It was from the fear of his own audacity. Snatch it fast and return. Inside the hole, it was warm, and the two ate quickly and greedily. The soft, juicy chicken was like a gift from heaven. On the third day, Ethan arrived with a new strategy. Not only meat but also an old, washed but still soft blanket that Sarah had given him for the puppies. He knew the food was only the first step. Next came connection and trust. He placed the food again in the usual spot. He set a few pieces of boiled beef and backed away. He is near. His scent, old leather from his jacket, his presence, is a comfort. A thought crossed Red's head. He lay wedged between the root and the dirty wall, feeling his heart pounding in his throat. Black was completely used to it, darting out, snatching the food, and bringing it back. He was hungry, but no longer feral. He would pause, staring at the man who sat on the rock, unmoving, like a fixture of the landscape. On the fourth day, Ethan decided to move closer. After Black had taken his portion again, Ethan crawled cautiously closer. He felt the cold asphalt digging into his knees through the thin fabric of his trousers. "Good boy," he whispered softly. "Do you have a name?" Black didn't vanish immediately after eating his portion. He paused, staring at the man. There was no panic in his eyes anymore, only a wary, exhausted fatigue. Ethan held out his hand. His wrist moved slowly, without tension. He placed his palm flat on the ground, a foot away from the puppy's nose. "He's going to touch. Danger. I saw the men strike. Mother said so." Red tensed painfully in the hole. But Black didn't bolt. He took a single step forward. His thin, dirty neck stretched. He sniffed Ethan's fingers. A faint, clean smell. Completely unlike the garbage and gasoline scent he was used to in the dump. Ethan didn't move. Only his eyes, full of quiet expectation, watched the puppy. Black slowly, almost imperceptibly, touched his nose to Ethan's thumb. It was the first, momentary, but decisive contact. "Good boy," Ethan exhaled. He felt the tension leave his shoulders. Nothing to be afraid of. Red finally pushed his head out. He saw Black standing near the man's hand. He saw the food and saw the problem. But Red didn't come out. He was too thin, too weak, too scarred. He retreated back into the darkness, leaving Black alone with the man. Ethan understood that Red did not trust him. He could have easily grabbed him, dragged him out by force, but that would forever break their bond with humanity. A cold wind whistled through the ruins, whispering that time was not on their side. Ethan backed away, making sure not to pressure the puppies. He pulled the soft blanket from his pack and carefully placed it on the ground, not too close to the hole, but close enough for the puppies to see and smell its clean, unfamiliar scent. Then he took out the last of the chicken. He placed it not on the concrete, but on the edge of the blanket. This was a new level of the game. To eat, Black had to set foot on this strange, warm material. Black emerged again. He looked at the food, looked at the blanket, and then at the man, who now sat cross-legged far away. What is this? Soft, but unfamiliar. Black's thoughts were simple: risk for survival. Very cautiously, he first touched the cloth with a front paw. It was warm and dry, completely unlike the cold, damp earth he slept on. The food was irresistible. He took one step, then two. As he was fully on the blanket, eating greedily, Red pushed his head out. He saw his brother eating on the strange, soft lump, and he was intrigued. Ethan watched, unmoving. He understood that they considered the whole salvation from the whole world, and Red considered it salvation from the human world. To get them out, he needed to lure them out of their personal fortress and show them that the outside world wasn't always hostile. The strong, suffocating smell of rancid meat, which penetrated the clean, dry fur from somewhere deep inside the hole, startled Red. This wasn't the fresh food the man had brought today. It was the heavy, pungent stench of hunger that he remembered from the day they became each other's only company. They were so small then, and their mother had found this place. The hole, under the fir root where Ethan had placed the blanket, looked different then. It wasn't littered with dry garbage. Mother, a large gray Malamute female with kind yet constantly vigilant eyes, had carefully packed the earth with her body and claws. She had scraped away the dirt and moved the branches to make the entrance as narrow and inconspicuous as possible. Her world was a constant, exhausting tension. It is warm here. It is safe here. Mother would press the puppies against her belly, panting heavily. Her breath was hot and humid, and her warm flank felt like the only reliable fortress in a cold, hostile world. The first thing the puppies remembered was the feel of their mother's hot, wet tongue against their noses. It was rough and damp, washing away the dirt and giving them an incredible sense of protection. Mother was their provider and their shield. Every day was a battle for survival, and every night, when Mother returned, it was a quiet salvation. She never came back empty-handed. She brought back whatever she could find, scraps of leftovers, pieces of bread, for them. They were inside the hole, and outside, in the ruins, life went on. Loud cars passed, branches creaked, and autumn rains thundered, turning the earth into sticky, slippery mud. But inside, under the protection of Mother's body, there was a world full of the smell of milk and safety. Mother taught them to be still. Humans walk silently. She never barked, only tensed her neck, pressing them to the ground, a wild, golden fire burning in her eyes. Once, a tall, drunk man approached the hole. He smelled of sour alcohol and cheap cigarettes. He found the puppies and reached out to grab them, but Mother sprang out. Her growl was not loud, but terrifyingly low and elemental. It came not from her throat, but from her very chest. The man laughed, but Mother's determination made him back away. He kicked the dry dirt and left, shouting something into the void. Mother returned. She lay down, resting her heavy head on her paws. She trembled for a long time, and the tremors traveled to the puppies. It was then that Black and Red, who didn't yet know words, understood: the world is dangerous. Only the den protects. Time passed. The puppies grew, their bodies getting stronger. Black started exploring. He was the first to emerge from the hole, sniffing the food the mother brought back or drinking from a puddle left by the recent rain. He was quick and curious. He arched his back when he saw a jumping mouse. He was the future hunter. Red, on the contrary, became more introverted and cautious. He preferred the darkness of the hole. For him, seeing Black return was enough to feel safe. He was the future guardian. Their life, though always lacking food, had an order. Mornings were for Mother's care, days for waiting, and nights for Mother's return and warmth. But even the brightest moments of life with Mother were provisional. The necessary fear was in the background. Mother never slept deeply. Any noise, any rustle, and she would prick up her ears, listening to the night. This fear, which she carried within her, slowly seeped into them. The beginning of their end was a perfectly ordinary morning. The air was crisp, cool, and smelled of rain. Mother licked them one last time. Her fur was strangely damp, as if she had been walking through the mud for a long time. "I'll be back soon." "Wait. Don't go outside." There was no anxiety in Mother's growl, but extreme seriousness. She pushed through the narrow entrance and disappeared. Black and Red waited. They cuddled together as usual, feeling the warmth of the adjacent body, which kept them from shivering in the damp air. They waited an hour, 2 hours. Mother is late. She must have found a lot of food today. She's bringing us a big bone. Black thought. They waited all day. It was warm, the thick, peaceful silence, warm as the hole was when Mother lay next to them, her flank rising and falling, creating a rhythm in which Black and Red could safely sleep. Then it became cold. The cold came not only from the earth but from the inside. The hole was empty. The damp air, previously warmed by Mother's body, was now bone-chilling. And the heavy, echoing silence replaced Mother's gentle breathing. Mother was gone. They waited the first day. The last traces of milk still in the puppies' stomachs dulled the hunger, but it was persistent. Black, the more active one, rolled around, trying to regain the familiar spot on Mother's flank, only finding the cold, hard walls of the hole. Mother will be back soon. She always comes back. She just needs a big bone. He told himself. Red, nestled against his brother, was gripped by sudden dizziness that came in waves. He felt his weak hind legs becoming numb from the inactivity and cold. He didn't want to believe he was alone. By evening, the tension had turned into panic. The sun was gone, leaving only a pale light that barely filtered into the hole. They waited until night enveloped the ruins. Night, which was previously protection, now became an endless space filled with threatening sounds. The creaking of branches sounded like footsteps. A distant howl sounded like a cry for help. The second day came. Hunger was now almost painful, like a burn. No milk, no water. There was only the smell of themselves, sour fear and old fur, in their noses. Black couldn't stay still anymore. His tail, usually hanging down, now trembled with anxiety, as if urging him to action. I have to search. I have to search. A weak, broken whimper escaped his throat. Red saw his brother about to leave and stretched out a paw to stop him. No. It's dangerous out there. His whimper was small but full of genuine terror. But Black was driven. He had to find Mother, the source of warmth, food, and safety. He pushed through the narrow entrance. The morning outside smelled of moisture and iron. Black looked around. Nothing. He stretched his neck, trying to catch Mother's familiar scent, but only smelled heavy gasoline from rotten wood and old tires. He walked around, rubbing his nose on the dry grass, sniffing the dirty concrete. He walked out onto the empty lot covered with poisonous weeds, ignoring the scratches of the burrs against the tender skin around his eyes. Finally, he returned to the hole. His breath was ragged, his small mouth dry. She's gone. He heavily rested his head on the edge of the entrance, and despair enveloped him like a cold fog. Red, sitting inside, understood everything without words. The emptiness that had resonated in his tiny world was now justified. On the third day, they understood they were alone. That knowledge was immense, like a shadow covering them. Black started acting. He knew that unless he found water and food, their eyes would close forever soon enough. He went out again. This time, he looked not for Mother, but for survival. He found a small, muddy puddle at the edge of the concrete slab, made murky by the night's rain. The water was cold but wet. He drank greedily, gulping loudly, until his belly was filled with a cold weight. Then he returned to the hole and cried out, loudly, brokenly, but gently. It was a summons. Red, trembling, pressed himself to the ground and looked at him. He heard his brother's short, necessary sound. He understood Black had found something important. Red hesitated. His delicate whiskers twitched with fear, but the thirst was stronger. Whimpering, he slowly pushed out. It was the first time he had voluntarily ventured out. He thrust his nose out, and Black, like a guide, nudged him toward the puddle. Red barely moved his legs, making his way to the water source. He drank for a long time until his belly ached. This action outside became their first tacit agreement. Black was the provider, the one who could bring salvation. Red was the guardian, the one who only came out at his brother's call but trusted him more than anyone in the world. They started eating grass. Bitter and tough. It scratched their throats but gave them a feeling of fullness. Black even found pieces of a plastic bag that seemed to smell slightly better than regular garbage. But as time went on, their strength failed. They were supposed to grow and get stronger. Their bodies shrank. Skin sagged over their ribs. Their cries became weaker and eventually turned into almost inaudible squeaks. Red lay, feeling his limbs heavy as lead. He watched the sun change position over the hole, understanding that every minute, every hour without Mother was a movement toward the end. He closed his eyes, trying to recall the warm, rough sensation of Mother, but the image was already beginning to fade. All that was left was the cold, the hunger, and the fear. The abandoned ruins were their prison, the hole under the root their tomb. The sky was leaden and low with hunger. It seemed to press heavily on the concrete slabs. Sharp, rusted metal was everywhere, gleaming like broken mirror shards under the moonlight. The heavy, sticky smell of gasoline from old barrels mixed with the damp scent of rotten leaves, creating an atmosphere of decay and indifference. This place felt designed for things to die in. But they still clung on. When night came, the cold ground sucked the last warmth from their bodies. Black and Red huddled together, curled into a single, dirty lump. The warmth they gave each other was their only asset against the bone-chilling air. Black always lay on the outside. His back was the shield. He was the lookout. Even in sleep, his whiskers twitched, reacting to any rustle of dry grass. Red hid on the inside. His nose buried in his brother's hot fur. He felt his brother's weak but steady heartbeat, the only thing supporting him on the edge of quiet despair. Their days became a recurring, mechanical nightmare. As soon as the sun rose, dim and powerless, above the horizon, Black ventured out for reconnaissance. He was exhausted, but his resolve was firm. Hunger gave him strength, fear took it away on the way. Direction. He knew all the dangerous spots, avoiding the shrubs with old burrs and the puddles covered with an oily sheen. Yesterday, he had brought back a hard, old crust of bread. It was dry as a rock, but it smelled of bread. They shared it, taking turns gnawing until the crumbs scratched their palates. Today, he brought back something worse, a few dry seeds that seemed to have no taste at all, but still, they chewed. They had to. "I can't anymore," Red whimpered when Black returned. His voice was hoarse from tension and constant dehydration. "You must try." Black briefly rubbed his nose against his brother's flank. "We have to try." They understood each other without words. This silent connection, born in darkness and calamity, was stronger than any affection. Black knew, Red was his anchor. If Red were gone, Black might panic and run into the woods to die. Red, despite his cowardice, gave him purpose, protection. Red knew, Black was his life. If Black stopped coming, Red wouldn't leave the hole. He would just curl up and die of hunger and fear. One day, while Black was searching near the rubble, he heard a sound that made his fur bristle. It was a loud, sharp, unpleasant sound, human laughter. Two young men emerged from behind a pile of broken bricks. They were loud and smelled of sweet drinks and cigarette smoke. They were throwing rocks at a discarded tire. Black instantly froze. His body turned to stone. His heart beat so fast he could feel it fluttering in his chest. He squeezed under the nearest patch of dry, thorny shrubs, blending into the dirty earth, and didn't move. "Look! A rat!" One of them, in a dirty red jacket, noticed him. He walked closer and kicked an empty plastic bottle. Black felt a cold terror envelop him. He couldn't run or even squeak. He felt the cold fear rising from his hind legs and filling his belly. The young man came so close that Black could see the mud on his sneaker. The young man crouched. His shadow covered the puppy like a heavy slab of stone. "It hurts, it hurts. Mother, mother, where are you?" Thoughts flew like trapped birds. The young man reached out his hand, but not to strike. He snagged a sharp thorn on the shrub branch. He pulled it hard, and since he saw nothing but mud under the shrub, he stood up straight. "Never mind. Let's go. We're out of time," he said to his friend. They walked away, their loud voices and laughter gradually receded, until they were almost inaudible whispers. Black lay still for another 5 minutes. He felt the damp earth chilling his underside. When the danger passed, he stood up, whimpering. His legs were like cotton from the tension. He returned to the hole. "What is it?" Red thrust his head out. His gaze was tense. He had heard the noise. Black didn't explain. He just rubbed his head against Red's, transferring the tremors and the terror of the recent experience to his brother. Red licked his brother's ear. He understood, and they curled up even closer. That day showed them the limits of human cruelty and indifference, but also made them understand that their bond was their only salvation. They were two lives in one. If Black survived, Red would survive too. Now, there was a new person, the man who brought food. But trust had to be earned. And until this new man proved his reliability, their fortress had to remain inviolable. The smell of old, damp tarp hit Ethan's nose. It wasn't his tarp, it was the one he had covered a pathetic, ailing dog with 12 years ago. Ethan recoiled his hand as if burned. "I was scared then. Scared of the responsibility, the stench, what Sarah would say." The memory was vivid, like a winter night's lightning flash. He had found him, an old, emaciated Malamute/husky with quiet, exhausted eyes. Ethan had brought food then, but couldn't bring himself to stop. When he returned the next day, the dog was dead, stiff under a thin sheet of ice. It was a debt unpaid. And now, staring at the dark entrance of the hole under the fir root, Ethan felt his hands trembling not from the cold, but from the tense resolve not to repeat the mistake. These two small creatures, Risk and Shadow, were his second chance. Ethan's daily trip turned into a sacred ritual. Every day, precisely at 3 o'clock, he would arrive. He wore an old, dull-colored jacket and walked slowly along the single path leading to the ruins. He moved slowly, trying not to make any sudden, threatening movements. His voice was monotone and quiet, directed at the space more than at them. "I brought food. Nobody's going to hurt you." He placed small portions of boiled chicken or beef, boneless and clean, on the clean, flat stone at the hole's entrance. Today, after yesterday's success with the blanket, he placed the food not only on the stone but also on the edge of the warm, soft cloth. Then he always retreated to the same distance, to the old stump he used as an observation point. He waited, watching the one he had named Black, Kuro. Risk, in his mind. The black puppy was a vortex of energy and determination. He darted out like a lump of coal. His eyes were focused only on the food. No curiosity toward the man, only the instinct for survival. He was thin but strong. He was the leader. Ethan watched Black greedily snatch the piece and disappear into the darkness. Over 3 days, Black had become bold enough to pause for a second on the blanket, sniffing the air, before retreating, instead of immediately hiding. But Red, aka Shadow, that was the real mystery, the real problem. Ethan had never seen Red completely, only a trembling red ear or a shadow quickly vanishing when Black passed him. He's scarred, Ethan thought. He saw something, or he was hurt. He's not afraid of me, he's afraid of the world I represent. A minute after Black took the food, Ethan always heard the quiet, double chewing sound from inside the hole. They were sharing. This observation stirred a deep, warm feeling in Ethan. In their world of desperate hunger, they hadn't become enemies. Black could have eaten it all alone, but he didn't. He risked his life for the one who didn't even have the courage to step into the light. That's strength, Ethan whispered, leaning against the cold trunk, in the bond. He understood that his goal was not just to feed them, but to break their connection to the hole. For Red, the hole was the only sanctuary. To save him, he needed to make the outside world, in the form of a human, more appealing than his terror. Ethan approached again. This time, he didn't retreat to the rock but knelt a few feet from the blanket. He slowly pulled a leather-work glove from his pocket. He placed it on the clean, dry ground and put an especially delicious piece of meat on top of it. This was an intermediate step. To get the food, Black had to leave their familiar safe zone, the stone and the blanket. He sat down. He straightened his back, trying to look as neutral and boring as possible. He looked at the clouds floating over the ruins, not at the hole. A few minutes later, Black emerged again. He came to the blanket and, then, raised his head. His small, round eyes looked straight at Ethan's hand, not with hostility, but with tense calculation. He saw the glove. The food was further away. Ethan didn't move. He breathed evenly, counting in his mind. Tension tightened his muscles, but he couldn't give up. Hunger. Black leapt out, ran across the edge of the blanket, pushed himself off the cold ground, and snatched the piece of meat from the glove. For a fleeting second, his small body brushed against Ethan's jacket. His warm fur slipped against the cloth. Black was back in the hole. Ethan slowly let out his breath. It was contact, physical contact. Tomorrow, I won't put the food on the glove. I'll hold it in my hand. He stood up. He knew Red had been watching. Red saw Black touch the human and safely return with the food. It was the first small light in the dark tunnel of their lives. Ethan felt a wave of energy and resolve. He would pay this debt. He would save both of them. The silence of the ruins was usually broken only by the creaking of steel beams and the loud, uncaring voices of young men walking from the housing developments to the paved road. This small forest was a buffer zone, a place where people either passed through or dumped their trash. Few cars ever came here. That's why the sharp, jarring screech of brakes, loud and abnormally close, startled Ethan. Black, who had just poked his nose out of the hole to sniff the food, instantly recoiled. A new scent of panic filled the hole. Red suddenly stood up. His thin, weak legs trembled. He tried to burrow under the root, which no longer offered any protection. He cried out, a short, broken sound, as if he were breathing his last. Ethan, sitting on the rock, tensed instantly. He felt his neck stiffen like stone. He knew a car wouldn't stop here without a purpose. "Hey! What are you doing here?" A sharp, unfamiliar male voice echoed very close. "Some kind of cult worshipper?" Ethan slowly turned his head. Parked in the entry path of the ruins was an old, muddy four-wheel drive Jeep. Two men in work jackets, with sun-weathered, rugged faces, climbed out. One held a long stick. "Good afternoon," Ethan kept his voice steady, trying not to betray any anxiety. "I live nearby. I'm feeding the strays." "Feeding strays?" The shorter, broad-shouldered man laughed. His laugh was hard and dry. "Ah, I see. Puppies. Well, you'd better clear out your pets. They breed, you know. The kids up the road are complaining about all the noise and barking." Ethan stood up abruptly. There was no fear in his eyes, only cold, instantaneous anger. "Don't touch them." His voice was firm and strong. He took a step toward the hole. "They're mine. I'm finding them a home." All right, the man waved his hand dismissively. "Just don't forget to clean it up. You know, the housing developments are close." They walked away, apparently discussing a broken lock on one of the warehouse doors. Ethan dropped to his knees right in front of the hole. "They're gone," he whispered. His heart hammered against his ribs, filling the air. "They're gone, boys." He took out the last of the chicken. He placed it in his open palm and offered it toward the hole. "Come out. Eat." Black, still trembling, didn't move at first, but the weight of hunger and the shock of the danger's proximity overcame the fear. Moreover, he watched. He saw the man stand between him and the threat. He saw the man take the hit. Black pushed out. His hind leg still quivered, but he approached the hand. He didn't snatch. He stretched his neck and slowly ate the meat from Ethan's palm. In that moment, while Black was eating, Ethan very carefully touched his back with his fingertips. The fur was dirty and matted, but underneath it, he felt warmth and a frantic heartbeat. Black didn't flinch. He allowed the touch. He didn't move, focusing on the one thing, but accepted the contact. Ethan slowly stroked him once, from the neck to the hips. Red saw it all. He saw Black eating from the hand. He saw the calmness on the man's face and the satisfaction on his brother's. He thrust his head out. His large red eyes were filled with caution, but no longer wild, almost a childlike curiosity. Ethan looked at him. "It's decided. It's going to be very cold tomorrow," Ethan said quietly to the puppies he could finally see together. "This is not where you belong." He knew he didn't have time for a long game tomorrow. Tomorrow was rescue day. The cold, damp earth was his infallible friend, his most trusted sanctuary. Red hated the outside world. It smelled of unfamiliar, irritating scents, gasoline, sharp pines, loud, threatening laughter. The outside world was where the big shadow struck and where Mother disappeared. Inside the hole, it was quiet. But now, after the noisy people came, smelling of sharp cigarettes, even his sanctuary seemed too brittle and weak. Red lay, trembling all over, unable to understand his condition. Two feelings fought in his small brain. The first was the old, unbearable terror. It pressed him to the ground, making him feel the dirt soak into his fur. The second was a new feeling, the warmth and the smell of meat coming from the man. Red watched. He saw the big, clumsy man stand as a shield between him and the loud, scary men. He saw his brave, exhausted brother, Black, allow the hand to touch his back without dying. Furthermore, he ate the best food from that hand. "Black is my life. If Black trusts, it's safe. If he eats, I must follow him." The thought was simple and instinctive. Red lived by Black's law. The fear of the world was great, but the fear of losing Black and the fear of starving were stronger. Morning came. The air was chillingly crisp and cold, but it promised a clear day. Ethan came early. He was alone, walking quietly as always. He brought not only food but also warmth. He spread a large, soft, thick blanket, not the thin one from before, and placed it right by the hole's exit. He brought a metal bowl of water and placed it on the edge of the blanket. And finally, two large, warm, fragrant pieces of meat. He placed them on the edge of the bowl. Ethan sat down. He turned sideways, pretending not to notice the hole, full of expectation. Black came out first. He moved confidently. His eyes fixed on the food. He stepped onto the blanket. Its softness accepted his paws like the forgotten memory of his mother's bedding. He ate his portion greedily, then approached the bowl of water. Ethan didn't move a millimeter. Black drank. His ears relaxed, and his tail finally lifted, making small, happy movements. Black turned toward the hole and whined. The cry was not a demand, but an invitation. Red, who had been watching everything with bated breath, understood. Now or never. His delicate red whiskers twitched. The muscles under his thin fur tensed, ready to bolt, but he didn't run. He forced himself to move. His head appeared in the entrance. His gaze went from Black to the man, and back again. Danger. Very dangerous. But Black is there. Red slowly, very slowly, pushed out. His body was flattened to the ground, showing submission and extreme fear. He felt the cold and the light on his fur. He didn't look at the man, only at his brother, like a guiding beacon. Red approached the blanket. He stepped on it. This was a victory. He had left the earth of his only sanctuary. He approached the bowl. He ate his portion. He drank the water. He raised his head. His eyes met Ethan's for the first time. It wasn't a gaze of terror, but a frail, brittle plea. "Don't hurt me." "I won't," Ethan said slowly and quietly. "Good boy. You are a good boy." He didn't reach out his hand. He respected his inner scars. He knew that one sudden movement could send Red vanishing back into the darkness, taking the last chance of salvation with him. Black approached Red and rubbed his nose against his brother's neck, as if saying, "It's okay. We're together." In that moment, sitting on the warm blanket, with a full belly and his brother beside him, Red made his decision. This man saved them. This man gave them warmth and food. The outside world, with this man, could be life itself. Ethan understood the time was right. He took a clean cloth and dampened it with water from the bowl. He slowly reached out to Black, who was closer. "Let's clean you up." His voice was quiet, a mere whisper. He very gently began wiping the mud from Black's nose. Black winced, even closed his eyes, experiencing a strange pleasure from the attention. When Ethan moved to Red, the puppy startled, but Black lay calmly next to him, and that reassured him. Ethan gently wiped Red's forehead and eyes. Then he picked up the blanket and stood up. "Let's go," he said. Black stood up, whimpering slightly from weakness, and took a step toward Ethan. Red also stood, but paused, looking back at the dark entrance of the hole. Freedom is always terrifying, but Red saw Black's broad back and followed. Ethan carefully picked them both up, holding them to his chest. The evening air was filled with the smell of approaching dusk. The sun was setting beyond the houses, painting the low sky in shades of purple and deep orange. The path Ethan walked was bumpy and dark, but he felt as if he were walking toward the light. He drove slowly. The two puppies lay on the back seat, wrapped in the soft blanket he had brought today. Black was curled up and fast asleep. His small body was relaxed for the first time with warmth and fullness. Red wasn't asleep. He lay quietly, his eyes open. He looked nervously at the shimmering lights of the housing development visible through the window, the bright rectangular streaks of light cutting through the trees. He wasn't trembling, but his small heart was beating fast. He felt the car's movement. It seemed unnatural, but at the same time, full of hope. He was next to Black, and that was everything. Ethan steered the wheel with one hand and occasionally touched the edge of the blanket with the other. A sense of accomplishment slowly, but surely, filled him. He had paid the old debt. He had saved them. He parked the truck in front of the house. Warm yellow light streamed from the kitchen curtains. A regular, cozy brick house. The smell of sautéed onions and home warmth was much stronger and cleaner than the reeking, anxious air of the ruins. Ethan carefully carried the bundle of puppies in his arms. They were incredibly light, just bones and fur, but he held them tightly, like the most precious treasure. He opened the door. "Sarah, I'm home." Sarah came out of the kitchen. She had a towel in her hand, wiping her hands. But seeing her husband standing there, carefully holding a dirty bundle that smelled of forest and moisture, she dropped the towel. "Ethan." There was no surprise in her voice, only quiet, accepting sympathy. She walked closer. "You brought them?" "I brought them," he said, slowly placing the blanket on the entrance floor. The puppies, startled by the new, bright light and the clean smell of the house, huddled together. Sarah knelt. She didn't touch them. She carefully opened the edge of the blanket. She saw two living creatures. One was muddy black, with a desperately brave stare. The other was red, thin, and had large, fearful eyes, hiding behind his brother. "Oh, they're so tiny." Sarah quietly gasped. "Just skin and bone, baby." Red whimpered and pressed against Black, seeing the new face and smelling the new, soft female scent. "This one is red," Ethan pointed to the red puppy. "He's the core. And this one," he pointed to the black one, "is Black." Sarah cautiously reached out to the black puppy. She touched his back. "Thank you. You did good." The simple, sincere praise from his wife lifted the last vestiges of old fear and guilt from Ethan. The next 30 minutes were a loving chaos of care. They prepared warm meat broth and placed it on a low mat. The puppies ate greedily, chewing audibly, without the fear of being robbed of food for the first time in days. Sarah chose a large cardboard box and lined it with an old, thick sweater and clean towels. A clean, soft place. It was the perfect sanctuary, much better than the cold, damp hole. Ethan tried to transfer Red to the box, holding him in his arms. The puppy resisted and thrashed, recalling painful past contacts, crying loudly and mournfully. "Shh," Ethan whispered, gently placing him on the sweater. Red immediately burrowed into the corner. But when Ethan placed Black next to him, the dog immediately snuggled into the soft cloth, and Red calmed down. He pressed against his brother, feeling his warmth and familiar smell, and his fear receded. "What shall we name them?" Ethan asked, watching the puppies, exhausted and saved, quickly fall asleep. "Black and Red?" Sarah smiled. Gentle fatigue was in her eyes. "No. Let's call Black Risk. He was always the first. He took the risk. And Red, let's call him Shadow. He was always by your side, but in the shadows. But now, they're both home." Ethan nodded. He placed a bowl of water next to the box. He looked at Risk and Shadow. They were sound asleep. They were safe. Ethan and Sarah quietly left the room to let the puppies sleep. Ethan leaned against the doorframe, feeling a great, empty sense of relief. "Thank you," he said quietly to his wife. "Thank you, Ethan," she replied. "Now we have Risk and Shadow, and no more unpaid debts." He felt the warmth of her hand on his shoulder. In his world, which had been gray and mundane, a new, small, but very bright day had begun, a day of hope and responsibility. Morning came not with a chilling cold, but with soft, diffused light. Shadow, now, woke up to the smell of a clean, soft sweater and the strong, comforting warmth of his brother next to him. He stretched his neck, feeling the tension of the last few days slowly melting away from his small muscles. He opened his eyes. The world was different. He was not on the cold, damp earth, but inside a huge, safe cardboard fortress. The walls were warm, and the air smelled of cleanliness, food, and a little bit of human. Risk, the black one, was asleep beside him. His black coat was shining from the dampness that Sarah and Ethan had wiped away. Shadow cautiously rubbed his nose against his brother's flank. Risk stirred slightly and fell back asleep. The first step out of the box was a test. When Ethan entered the room, Shadow immediately burrowed into the corner, trying to vanish as he always did in the hole. "Shh, boy," Ethan's voice was gentle but firm. He brought a bowl of warm water. Brave and hungry, Risk immediately came out to drink. Shadow watched Risk drink. And the man just sat nearby, not making any sudden movements. This consistency and predictability was the new law of his life. The contrast between then and now was shocking. Then, food was stolen, bitter, and dirty. Sleep was broken on the cold ground, every sound a threat. Stench, fear, dampness, decay. Now, food, warm meat broth, carefully delivered to the box by the man. Sleep, uninterrupted and deep in the warmth of the sweater. Scent, cleanliness, the safety of soft cloth. The main test came an hour later, the journey. Ethan carefully wrapped the puppies in the blanket. Risk didn't struggle for long. He had already begun to associate Ethan's scent with safety. Shadow burrowed into the middle of the blanket, becoming a lump of stone, uttering not a single sound. The clinic was full of sharp, antiseptic smells, barking dogs, meowing cats, and loud voices. Shadow was not breathing. He only felt the strong, sure hands of the friend who held him tightly but gently, and the warmth of his brother next to him. The examination was unpleasant but quick. A strange female vet touched them, palpated their thin bellies. Shadow had a panic attack, but Ethan held him tight, talking in low, comforting sounds. "Severe dehydration and emaciation," the vet said. "They have hookworms, but they have a chance to survive." As they left the clinic, clean, treated, and with a few medications, Ethan felt the heavy weight of anxiety turn into confidence. They will make it. The evening passed in quiet calm. Sarah tried to feed them for the first time. Shadow did not eat. He waited until Sarah left, and then, following Risk's example, he crawled to the bowl. Sarah watched them with a gentle smile. "Look, Ethan," she whispered. "Risk, he's so fast. He accepted our world. Shadow, he's our challenge, our responsibility. We have to earn his trust." Ethan felt a surge of pride. This was hard. It was a responsibility, but it was the right thing to do. "We will earn it, Sarah," he replied. "It just takes time." He sat on the floor next to the box. Risk cautiously came out and approached his feet. He sniffed his shoes, then Ethan's face. Shadow saw this and took a small, decisive step. He poked his nose out of the box. He didn't approach the man, but he was watching. He stopped hiding. It was a great victory. Shadow had taken one step out of the shadow of his fear. It wasn't complete, but he did it. "Good night, Risk." "Good night, Shadow." Ethan whispered, watching the two small, saved creatures curl up into a warm lump again. 6 months, half a year, passed quickly, like summer rain. During this time, the abandoned ruins became a distant, blurred memory, and the small, frightened balls of fur turned into two healthy, clever, and sleek Alaskan Malamutes. They were no longer puppies, but full members of the family. Ethan sat on the deck, watching them. Risk, the former black, was a large black Malamute with a powerful chest and eyes full of vitality and curiosity. He was the leader and the adventurer, but his devotion to Ethan was absolute. He stood in an alert position, ready for commands. His tail wagged regularly, like a happy pendulum. Shadow, the former red, had grown into a sleek, reddish-brown Malamute with an almost feline grace. His eyes were still deep and thoughtful, but there was no fear in them anymore, only quiet, calm confidence. He never strayed far from Sarah. Sarah and Risk had helped him overcome his scars, and now Shadow was her reflection, calm, gentle, and incredibly smart. Training became the foundation of their new life. Sarah took on the principles of obedience with unwavering patience and kindness. Ethan took on the sports games and physical development. They worked as a team, and the dogs responded with complete dedication. Risk was a genius of speed. The come command was executed instantly, and he flew like a black arrow. He adored learning and accepted praise as his main reward. Shadow was a genius of intellect. He understood commands with half a word, sometimes anticipating the gesture. Sit, stay, down. He executed everything with a quiet, focused precision. His internal fear had transformed into internal self-control. On the lawn, when Sarah gave the command, Risk and Shadow simultaneously took position at Sarah's and Ethan's feet. Their movements were synchronized and perfect. Good boys, everyone. Sarah knelt, hugging Shadow, and Risk rubbed his head against Ethan's leg. Ethan felt the warmth and weight of Risk's head pressed against his thigh. It was a feeling worth everything. In the evening, when the house was quiet, they slept by their owner's bed. Risk lay stretched out calmly on his mat, but Shadow always crawled right up to Ethan's bed. He rested his head on the mat, sighed, and looked at Ethan. And only when Ethan reached down and gently stroked his red neck did Shadow close his eyes. It was their daily ritual. The contact that chased away the last vestiges of terror. Sarah watched this and once said, "Remember you said you wanted to repay an old debt? Risk is proof of your strength, and Shadow is your reward for patience." Ethan nodded. He looked at the two dogs lying in absolute safety and remembered that cold, cursed ruin. He closed his eyes and felt the warm, clean, rough texture of Risk in his hand. They were no longer just black and red. They were Risk, the brave, the strong, the one who first stepped into the new world. And Shadow, the wise, the cautious, the one who learned to trust and found the light. And they were family. Their loud bark when the doorbell rang, their joyful running in the yard, their constant presence by their owner's side, all of it filled Ethan and Sarah's life with deep meaning. Ethan stroked Risk's head. "My good boys." The rescue story ended with a story of love and absolute trust. The debt was repaid, and life continued.